First of all, if you're feeling alienated or bored or discontented in your career, it likely has a lack of meaning. A key to success in most traditional legal practice areas involves understanding the relationship of risk to the client's preferred outcome. Right, and the preferred outcome might be winning a trial or at least having a favorable settlement. Before you move into a career transition, it is imperative that you commit to engaging in a growth mindset. A growth mindset is one in which you are committed to the process of change.
Welcome, and thank you all for joining us for another Justia webinar. My name is Nina, and I'll be the moderator for today. Now, to kick things off, I want to go ahead and introduce our speaker, Scott Mason. Scott Mason is an attorney and transformational executive leadership coach for lawyers looking to uplevel their careers or leadership skills and have a future that, as he puts it, is epic. Based on his trailblazing framework, Scott will help you and the leaders in your company or firm be more connected to themselves, their colleagues, their mission, as well as becoming more creative and resilient. The webinar that you're about to watch will be approximately 1 hour, and Scott will be taking audience questions once the presentation is complete. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask him towards the end of the webinar, please feel free to use that Q&A button in the control panel at the bottom of your screen. Now, without further ado, here is Scott to discuss the secret to career transitions that are epic.
Wonderful. Let's get to it. So, as Nina just mentioned, today is about utilizing a career transition process so that your future can be epic. But before we begin with that, I'd like us each to take a quick second, close your eyes if you will, or keep them open if you're so inclined, and ask yourself an honest question. When it comes to my career as a legal professional, what am I magnetizing? When it comes to my career as a legal professional, what am I magnetizing? Is it abundance? Is it joy? Fulfillment? Is it maybe inspiration? Inspiration related to the people that you work with or the work itself that you do, maybe the bosses that you have. Is it excitement about your career path and where you see your future going if you stick with it the way it is right now? Or is it perhaps frustration, alienation, hopelessness? If your answer to that question sounded anything like the last set of answers that I gave, this may be the most important CLE that you ever take. And by the way, for much of my legal career, my own answer to that question was that last set of answers: boredom, frustration, alienation, discontent, emptiness. This is a dangerous place for anyone to be in. In fact, it's not just dangerous in the long term, it presents an imminent and real danger to you right now. And there are 5 reasons that I can think of just off the top of my head that I put down here that I ask each of you to consider in the strongest terms possible. First of all, if you're feeling alienated or bored or discontented in your career, it likely has a lack of meaning. And if your career doesn't have meaning, then on an existential level, you're almost certainly going to begin to feel anxiety, whether acute or ongoing. And if you're feeling anxiety, particularly if it's ongoing, it's going to have a negative impact on your ability to focus on your career and your future and your motivation to keep moving forward with enthusiasm and joy. And a lack of focus and motivation can in turn cause a lack of ongoing real learning to occur, as well as personal and professional growth, particularly anything that's transformational or that can elevate you beyond where you are. And finally, without real learning, deep personal and professional growth, true success seems further, further, further away. I say this as someone who experienced every one of those things. There's good news here, and that is that things can change. I've been through it, and I've lived to tell the story. And that is why I care. I knew when I began my own career transition from being a lawyer into the life that I live now, that it would be a long, hard journey. I also knew, and ended up actually having happen, that I would make a lot of mistakes along the way. But I documented every single step that I took because I knew that my ultimate destiny would be to help others who were facing the same demons that I was, to be their guide, to help them end up on the other side just like I did, but without a lot of the delays and wrong turns and errors that I made. And that's why I'm here today. And that's why I believe it's important to have a real process. That documentation that I just mentioned ultimately became the roots of everything that we're going to talk about now, and that can help you have a career transition that changes your life around for the better, that moves you from that sense of hopelessness, frustration, emptiness, or despair into living a life where you're feeling the exact same sort of enthusiasm that I hope you're feeling coming right through the screen to you about where I am right now. If I can do it, you can too. And we're going to talk exactly about how you can do it. Who is this for? First of all, attorneys seeking to successfully transition from individual contributorship roles into leadership roles. That is actually a major career transition. And it's one that needs to be done in consideration of the exact same process that we're going to talk about during this session today. We're also going to be directing this session to unhappy attorneys who are seeking a different career path, particularly this third category that you see on the screen, which is lawyers interested in seeking a non-traditional career path, or who are interested in entrepreneurship. It might be legal entrepreneurship, or it might be something else altogether. My first pathway into entrepreneurship was co-owning a manufacturing company. So it could be a whole host of things. Any of those outcomes are going to be benefited by learning from this course today. And as to just sort of build on what Nina said, a little bit more about me, I work with attorneys who need the mindset, the vision, and the powerhouse personal voice to be able to magnetize and monetize the sort of professional freedom that everyone, including every attorney that I know or have ever known, deserves. Then to feel like a charismatic Olympian because you're happy and fulfilled. So, what are we going to talk about today? What's the agenda looking like? Briefly, we're going to discuss risk dynamics, specifically risk dynamics as they relate to career transitions and attorneys. Then we're going to talk in detail about how to navigate your professional transition. We're going to talk through a 4-step process, which includes understanding the personal myths that we tell ourselves and how those relate to professional outcomes. We're going to discuss then how to rewrite your professional framework to build a scaffolding upon which a better future can be built. We're going to then discuss the unlocking of your charisma so that you can galvanize people and resources behind you, because anytime you make a major transition, you're going to need help. And then finally, how to build a professional freedom plan, that plan that takes you from the here and now into that vision that you've created along the way. We're going to close out with some key takeaways. By the way, the professional freedom plan is also going to include an ethics component, so make sure that you pay special attention to that. So, risk dynamics. Why am I talking to y'all about risk dynamics today? Well, it almost goes without saying, but in a way, nothing can ever go without saying. A key to success in most traditional legal practice areas involves understanding the relationship of risk to the client's preferred outcome. Right, and the preferred outcome might be winning a trial or at least having a favorable settlement, taking an employment action and succeeding, signing a contract, or whatever it might be. Any good lawyer, and we start being this way from day one of law school, assesses the issues that impact risk and then find ways to minimize and reduce that risk. So some of the major trainings in law school, including the exams themselves, as well as the job functions and expectations that employers or clients have vis-a-vis attorneys, have a dispositional can create a dispositional impact that is heavily influenced by this relationship that we are trained to have with risk. By dispositional impact, what I mean is that if we are spending, if you're lucky, 8 hours a day, but it's more likely 10, 12, 15, sometimes more hours a day, 6, 7 days a week, thinking about risk and ways to mitigate risk, it impacts who you are inside and the worldview that you can create. And so if that dispositional impact becomes imbued with the risk dynamic that forms the pool that we swim in all the time, then that can make career transition, which is inherently risky, something that is specifically and particularly fraught for attorneys, particularly if it is anything approaching a dramatic career transition. Now, where might be some areas that dispositional resistance to risk play out? Money is the big one, but also things like competence. We can become so used to seeing ourselves as lawyers that we sometimes wonder if we can do anything besides be lawyers. There was a 70-year-old attorney that I spoke to one time who hated his entire life. And he said, I stuck with this through thick and thin because I couldn't imagine myself as anything else. In other words, he didn't feel that he could step into any other role competently. And that can really hurt us when we think about the full spectrum of opportunities that the world presents to attorneys like us. Social prestige. All of us, well, I would say most of us, reap benefits from being an attorney in the social sphere, and that people take it seriously. We have gravitas, we have social respect, we have proof by virtue of the fact that we got our JD and then passed the bar, that we have an ability to be players in the world, which is why lawyers are naturally seen as leaders and why lawyers get into politics and other very high profile and respected professions. And then another area where this dispositional impact that limits our ability to see our future can play out can be a visioning. If we only see our futures or our professional outcomes within a highly limited place in which risk is constantly mitigated or non-existent, then, as I referenced a little bit more indirectly earlier, but I'll put more of a nail on the head right now, we cannot envision everything that's possible. And I would argue, and we'll discuss this a little bit more later, that if you are an attorney, in a way, practically everything is possible. So, if you ask yourself the hard question as to whether the very fraught relationship that most attorneys have with risk is impacting how you view yourself professionally and outside of your day-to-day practice, here are some tips that can help you manage it. First and foremost, acknowledge that it is an issue. Nothing can change in anyone's life if they won't acknowledge that the change is necessary. Number two, surround yourself with people whose relationship to risk is radically different than yours. In other words, if you have people in your network, it might be relatives, it might be clients that you have that, I don't know, maybe are in the VC or the entrepreneurial world, or who are artists, or who are daredevils, anything, who feel differently around risk. Talk to them about it. Think about how they might handle things if they were in your situation. Begin to let other mindsets seep into your own head, and over time, the default grooves of thinking that can keep you settled in an anti-risk attitude when it comes to your career can begin to shift a little bit. Always assess the risk of risk aversion. That might sound a little bit kooky, but when you think about it, it's true. Risk aversion is itself very dangerous. And here's an example. I worked in government for many years, and a lot of attorneys in the government sector loved it because they viewed it as completely stable. No one ever gets fired in government. You're always safe. You will get that paycheck no matter what. You'll have your benefits and your pension, all that sort of stuff. And then one day, suddenly it changes. One day, suddenly budgets are cut, or that a new boss comes in who's determined to drive you out, or any of a number of things. And because of the assumption that based on in risk aversion, that risk was something that didn't need to be confronted, those attorneys can end up in a very terrible situation. Think about the risk of risk aversion in advance. And as I've hinted at earlier, whatever got you through law school will get you through whatever you put your mind to do. As lawyers, we are some of the hardest working, smartest, dedicated, driven, deadline sensitive people that there are. We are achievers. And if you are afraid of switching into something else, remember, you've already done something that the majority of the population can't even dream of having done. Become a lawyer. All right. So I'm having a little bit of an issue with the slides here. There we go. So how do we do exactly what this person is doing right now on this screen, navigating the tightrope of career transition? Well, let's talk about the 4-step process. I'll summarize it first and we'll go into details. 1, identify and obliterate what is holding you back. Number 2, rewrite that professional scaffolding I mentioned earlier and then begin to build on it. Number 3, unlock your charisma. Number 4, create an actual plan for your professional freedom, including the considerations that I will discuss in a lot of detail in a few moments. So let's talk about a concept that is of utmost importance to this transition, enough that I put it right up front and first, which is the concept of personal myths. Our personal narratives, particularly as lawyers, as I mentioned during that intro section, drive us to or away from success. We often tell ourselves narratives subconsciously. When they are internalizations of larger social and cultural narratives, they're just like Greek myths or other ancient myths that were really the manifestations of cultural expectations, of cultural norms, of cultural aspirations, of cultural fears. They become mythologized inside of us. They become our personal versions of things like Greek myths. So, pivotal to the arc of your professional life is its relationship to the concept of identity. Being a lawyer is a role. You are not born a lawyer. You will not die a lawyer. And you likely, hopefully, have other things that you do in your life. You might be a parent. You might be a bowler. You might be someone who likes to knit or to read books. All of those things are roles that you play in your life. Too many times people, particularly in overwhelming professions like the law, where there's a lot of work and it takes up a huge amount of time and mental space, confuse their role as lawyers with their entire identity. And evidence of that occurs when people who just meet you ask what you are. Who are you? A lot of times people say, I am an attorney. I am a general counsel. I am a partner at XYZ law firm. Think about what you're saying when you say, I am. You're making a statement about identity. And what that's saying to me is that on some level, you're viewing a role, a temporal thing, as core to who you are. Your identity is much, much more than that. It includes the entire continuity of your life. It includes a whole host of things. And when you define your entire identity by your role, then it becomes next to impossible to see out of it. If your identity is too locked into your current role as a lawyer, or is even simply just a traditional role of what a lawyer can be, in other words, I am a law firm lawyer, I can never work in-house. That's not what a law firm lawyer is. Or I am a general counsel, I can never be an operations head. That's just not what I do. Then you are putting yourself in a position where by creating an identity locked into that, you're not able to begin to see, let alone write a new professional narrative. And if you don't have a professional narrative that takes you into a different place, it ain't going to happen except in the rarest of circumstances. And then additionally, if you're not happy with your job or your career, it keeps you bound to that, like Prometheus to the rock with his liver constantly being eaten by an eagle. So before you move into a career transition, it is imperative that you commit to engaging in a growth mindset. A growth mindset is one in which you are committed to the process of change. It's like being a white belt in martial arts. You're willing to learn everything that you need to, or take whatever steps and shifts that you have inside in order to be able to broaden your identity and make sure that you have a full understanding of what it can be, and then are prepared to take the steps that you're going to need to take in order to write that different narrative. This all sets you up for step one of the process, which is to identify and obliterate those toxic myths that are holding you back. You want to begin by exploring exactly what is making these personal myths toxic. What are the elements of your narrative that are keeping you stuck, or that are keeping you from moving forward? Why haven't you done it already? For instance, is your narrative driven by one of those dispositional impacts that we talked about earlier, driven by fears of losing money or social prestige, or being perceived as a failure, which is, by the way, one that drove me for a long time. Oh, would people think I was a flop as a lawyer if I went and moved into a different professional direction? Or is it perhaps driven by another narrative component that can keep you is stuck in a place that is miserable? For instance, cynicism. Oh, things never get better for me. Or just habit. It's comfortable. Even though I'm miserable, I'm comfortable being miserable, right? All of those things are elements of your narrative that can keep you unhappy. And then look at whether role confusion is forcing you into a career narrative that gets you stuck, like we talked about a few minutes ago. Have you relinquished authorship of your own myth? In other words, are you acting as a character in someone else's story? If the Iliad was about your life, would you be one of the characters in it, or would you be Homer writing the doggone thing? I really recommend that people understand this concept of personal myths and personal narratives and embrace it wholeheartedly, because it gives you the power to say, my narrative so far has been XYZ. Now I'm going to turn it into ABC. I'm going to truly take control of the entire arc of my life. And once you really have that in your mind, then that myth or that narrative that you write for yourself can take you a lot of places. That's what began to give me the courage to step out of law altogether and move into manufacturing, which I knew nothing about. Yet I managed to succeed, and you can too. So are the roles you're playing also aligned with your values? Are you sure you know what your values even are? So again, if the role that you're playing in your personal narrative, or that narrative itself, is not aligned with what you fundamentally believe in, you're going to be unhappy. And you need to make sure that you understand what your values are, not just what the world says your values should be, so that when you make that change, you're ready to be able to feel good that it's going to have that level of alignment. Then you want to begin to, after you've done that deep multi-level self-reflection that I just discussed, to start to take action. Begin to write down your answers to all of the questions above. And you're going to get all of this stuff in your supplemental material. So you're going to have it right in front of you to begin to doodle with and think on and do this writing. If you don't really know what your values are, I've had clients say to me, Scott, I have no idea what my values are. I've never thought about it before. I urge them to keep a values journal, which is a journal of the decisions that you make that reflect who and what you really are. So for instance, if you say work-life balance, that's everything for me, but you, every time you have a choice, choose not to honor work-life balance, then maybe work-life balance isn't really what your value system is. Maybe your values aren't what you think they are. And so that's why I say focus on your decisions. Ethics, morals, values, they never occur just as statements. They are actually lived through decisions. And then identify purpose-driven lessons from all of the struggles that you have gone through in your career. In other words, if you have really struggled over and over feeling frustrated because you feel like you're not helping anyone, or that you're helping a group of people as a lawyer that you are not aligned with, then, really think, okay, this is actually pointing me in a different direction. Maybe my purpose needs to be helping XYZ group of people that I wish I were helping rather than those that I am supporting right now. The next step to this process is to begin to rewrite your professional framework. And what do I mean by that? In order for us to begin to become something different, there has to be an underlying foundation. There has to be self-confidence in who and what you are to step into something as radical as an epic career transition, or sometimes even just a small scale career transition. We need to know who and what we are for it to work and for it to begin to feel like it's something that we really can pour our hearts and our souls and our spirits into. So identify as an initial matter some inner relics from your past that go as to who you really are. I always tell clients, think about who you wanted to be or what you wanted to be as a child. I used to want to be the communications officer on the Starship Enterprise. Well, that actually taught me something. That taught me that I liked to communicate, that I liked to speak and engage with people. And surprise, surprise, upon realizing that, I ended up a speaker and a 5-time podcaster, right? That relic of my childhood did point to the future. What skills or hobbies or do you engage in that might have some relevance in a career and that might add value in situations outside of that hobby or that fun thing, that fun activity? And then what skills in your current job, even if you don't like the overall job or career path that you're on, well, what skills can be transferable somewhere else? And, things like understanding of compliance or client relations or that sort of thing. And then what about your job do you like? Because you want to, if possible, replicate those things. And then I also urge you, just as part of this practice, to speak to 5 to 10 people that you're close to, that you trust, that will be honest with you about how they see you. What are the core qualities that they believe you really shine in? And in every single case, when I urge someone to do this, and when I did this myself, there were variations between people, but some central themes came over and over again. I think anyone watching this, right, would not be surprised to hear that I heard over and over again, Scott, you have a lot of energy. Others have said to clients of mine, you have compassion, or you're a great artist, or you're hyper organized in your thinking. And those assessments can then be melded with the review of your own inner relics to get a better picture of who and what you are. And then you want to do what I call the purpose exercise. Having figured out who and what your core qualities and characteristics are, concretely nail down your reason for being by simply applying a formula that I have right here, which is put together your skills and your experiences, those qualities about you that make you so special, and then connect it to a larger service that is related to your values, something bigger than you. And that's where thinking about the lessons that you've learned from some of the struggles in your life and your career can really help, because a lot of times the things that we struggle with are those that we ultimately end up feeling the most passion about helping other people with regard to. I struggle to find my right career. I feel passion about helping you. I know someone who struggled with spinal issues his entire life, and that's why he has such passion towards being doing a lot of spinal manipulations and things like massage and acupuncture. Then put together a strength building plan. And in that strength building plan, you want to identify, based on everything that you've discussed so far, the skills that you have that you want to elevate to a superpower. Number two, the skills that you don't have, but that are developable, right? Like, let's say you aren't really an expert in interpreting financial documents, but you kind of have that skill and can know you can build it. And then the skills that you don't have and that you'll never be able to develop. It might be that you are bad at math and you will never be able to develop a skill at math. I know someone like that. That's me. And, right, those are the things you want to offload to other people, and you want to begin to think about what that might look like early on, and who you might want to bring in your circle that can do those things. Then you want to start to develop a vision statement for your whole life. And that vision statement, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail below, really documents and incorporates things like any physical, mental, values-based reasons why you might or might not be able, or might not be able to, or might be unwilling to pursue a professional opportunity. And it might be, for instance, that you can't pursue some opportunities because you have a physical challenge that just keeps you from being able to do it. Or it might be that you view that as unethical for whatever reason. It might also be what I call a personal non-negotiable. Like, let's say you have a parent who's ill that needs a lot of your attention and you can't take your focus away from that. If you identify those things, those can just help narrow down the vision for opportunity. And then when it comes to money, you want to think very, very carefully about that. Where does money really sit in your value system? Is it at the top? Is it in the middle? Or is that really something you don't care about, as long as you can pay your rent and put food on the table, right? And when I ask people to think about that, I really say to them, think about what you need when you go through your transition versus really what you just want, right? Right? Like, I don't know. I've had clients that say, I really need to buy, or, to go out to 5-star restaurants every month because that's how I have my pleasure. Well, is that really a need or is it a want? Is that something you can sacrifice? I'm not going to place judgment on it, but I want people to be realistic about that, because transitions can involve a shift in your financial situation until you get your bearings. But that being said, are you also discounting the long-term gains versus the short-term change in your financial situation? Because if you go into something that you're really aligned with, a lot of times the financial remuneration can be extraordinarily high, much higher than you might have had if you stayed employed for somebody else. And then with all of those things in mind, you create a broad stroke vision as to what your life would look like. It's very germinal. It is not going to be the final thing, but you want to make it flexible enough so that you can shift it as your life begins to shift. And you also want to have it be experiential, not just XYZ. This is what I'll be doing every day, and this is how it'll look from a data perspective or from how I describe it, but how will it feel to be that person? When I did my vision statement, for instance, I wanted to feel energetic and energized. And other people said they want to feel peaceful. That's what one of my clients said. I just want to feel peace. And we made sure that her vision statement accounted for that. Then unlock your charisma. Like I said a little while ago, anytime we make a change in life, we're going to need to have some helping hands come out there and help pull us out or point us in the right direction. And you want to be able to convince people that you're worth their time and energy investing in when you're making that change. That's why charisma is so important here. Charisma is one of those words that everyone seems to have a definition for. So I'm just going to give you my own definition, which is the ability to command attention in order to obtain a positive outcome. The ability to command attention in order to obtain a positive outcome. It's not being loud. It's not being dramatic. Introverts can be very charismatic. Quiet people can be very charismatic. Small, petite people can be every bit as charismatic, if not more so, than bigger than life, huge personalities. It doesn't mean dominating or speaking over people. What you want to do is spend some time looking at videos of yourself speaking or talking to other people and having them assess how you communicate so you can figure out what your strengths are, begin to work to elevate those, and identify areas to build on and improve. Now, once you do that, those are technical skills, but you're also going to want to, while you're working on your charisma, begin to nail down more and more what is the message that undergirds your vision. In other words, really, what is the message about what I'm here for? What problem or what way am I helping others in the career transition that I want to make? And that's the messaging. Genuine charisma is technique, but as applied to the expression of a message in a brain with the full range of feelings in your heart that unlocks a powerhouse voice valve inside. And then that emotion, that energy, and that feeling comes forth. And that's what gets people attracted to you and gets them to want to help you. So you want to then, as you're working on this, begin to gradually write down how your message is refining more and more. And ultimately, that will become your mission statement. The vision statement is what you want your life to generally look like and feel like. The mission statement is how you want to get there. So your vision statement may be, I want to have a global positive impact on climate change. And your mission statement would be, I want to start a nonprofit that begins to connect grassroots climate activism with national level climate activism and policy. And that is my mission. Once you have that mission, you're going to be able to communicate it using the charismatic techniques that you've developed, and people will snap to attention and want to help you. Then you move to building out your plan. So you want to, first of all, list 1 to 5 business or career or professional choices that match you, that will ultimately take you to your vision and that are consistent with your mission statement. And you want to identify them in order of preference with a brief explanation as to why, and then you want to rate how realistic they are. And when you think about rating how realistic they are, don't just think about it again in terms of, well, this is achievable or not. That's part of what you want to have as part of your realism rating. But you also don't want to squander the opportunity to have a career transition that's epic by going into something else that even makes you more miserable. So begin to also rate, or consider in your rating how happy that would make you to be that person doing that. Then engage in basic training on networking so you can begin to surround yourself with those people who can help you get where you want to go or can get you those resources. And networking is a skill. I wish they taught networking in law school. Unfortunately, they don't. But it is a skill that is every bit as important as any other skill that we learn in law school. The key things that you want to figure out based on what you've identified so far is, where do you go to network? For instance, if you are wanting to be this climate change person, then you may want to find groups or conferences that deal with climate change and that have executives in that space around. Or you may want to go to become involved in political action groups that are connected to this, or other sorts of places. Then what are the basic protocols of networking? If you have not networked or learned how to network, it may be a shock to learn, it certainly was a shock to me, that there are certain rules around networking. There are certain things that you do to be viewed as a master networker, and there are certain things that you never ever do. And so spend the time to understand what are the rules of networking and begin to apply those. And part of that will avoid making networking icky. Before I started to really network, and with a lot of clients that I work with, they say exactly what I felt all along. Networking is gross. They imagine people sitting in some conference room with cheap croissants in the background, handing out business cards or grabbing for business. That's not master networking, and that is icky. What you want to do as a networker is be something very different than that. So really learning about how to network is the way to avoid being that. There are incredible resources out there on how to network. 2 that I recommend are listed below. One is a book, Foundational Networking, by a lawyer named Frank Agan. who founded a business networking group in the Midwest that actually kind of rules the Midwest. So he truly is a master networker. The book is great. And again, him being a lawyer puts him in a position where he's able to relate to a lot of the challenges that we face. And as you can suspect, he's someone who went through this exact sort of transition that I'm talking about, and we're all here discussing today. And then an interesting one is by a man named Rob Thomas. He's not the singer, although sometimes I'm sure he wishes he was, but he's an incredible networker. And what I like about Who Do You Need to Meet is it explains exactly how to network up. It explains exactly how to identify who will get you to those people that you need to help you along on your journey. He also goes into a lot of detail about how to successfully navigate and leverage your presence at things like conferences and trade shows. I find trade shows and conferences overwhelming, but after reading that book, I have to admit I can confidently go into those things and actually move my life along. And I've seen other people who apply what he does at all sorts of situations I've been in. These people blow me away. I'm just so impressed by it. And I want that to be you. So let me move the screen here. All righty. Then finally, you want to get to the real meat, which is building your actual plan to take all of the stuff that you've learned, your vision, your mission, your career ideals that you've ranked, as well as then to implement your networking skills and get you from where you are today to that future that you're so excited about engaging in and living. And so what needs to happen for that to occur? First of all, again, sort of implementing those networking steps will then put you in a position where as you have more and more conversations, you begin to gradually narrow down exactly what the career is. And as you do that, you're also going to want to, as you're talking to people and meeting them, figure out whether the problem that your new career position is there to solve is actually a problem for anyone. And if not, what are the pain points that people in an area related to the area that you want to get into actually have? And are you positioned to do that? So, for instance, if going back to this climate change activist, career transition, if your goal is to be somehow connecting large-scale international and national climate policy with grassroots activism, well, are there already organizations that have that locked up? And are they doing it so well that no one actually feels that there's a need for that role? If so, that may be something to consider, because there's no pain point that you would be resolving. There would be no need for you to be in that position. If, on the other hand, you are, if there's no one solving that, everyone is saying is talking to this about says, "Oh my God, I wish someone was doing that." Then that gets you thinking this isn't a great idea. Let's say you want to move and become a CFO somewhere. Well, what is the problem that a CFO solves? And are you, in the way you position yourself and as you think about your career, going to be the ideal person to solve that problem for employers that are good matches for you? So figure out who has the problems that your career transition would enable you to be the right person to solve it, and then build a case using all of those legal persuasion skills that we have learned, all those case building and issue identifying and all these other things that we just naturally do as lawyers, to explain to everyone you meet why you are the best, most unique and valuable solution to the problem that they have. Every CEO you meet, I am the best CFO solution to your problem. Every climate CEO or executive director that you run into, this is what I do. I am the solution to your problem. I'm the only one, and I'm the best one too. And once you have that messaging down, you're going to begin to have clarity as to exactly what that new role looks like. And then you're gold, because you can begin to really set up a plan that's meaningful, targeted, and specific. You put together a formal action plan that includes the major goals that you need to achieve in order to get there, the big picture things that will take you from here to now. Then you also want to include action steps and timelines, and look at that every day or every other day, and calendar your progress based on what those things are, or calendar your activities. It says today that I need to send out inquiry letters to 5 potential employers in this space. Okay, Put that in the calendar. Did you do it? And then check that off. And if you do that, you will see incremental but consistent process. You want to have that self-discipline to follow through with that plan, but most of us don't. For many of us, reading the newspaper or going for an extra yoga class or something else can be a lot more appealing than taking that next step, particularly if you're in a day where you're like, things aren't moving as fast as I want. And so that's why I really recommend that you get some sort of accountability partner who understands this plan, who works through it with you, and who meets with you to talk about your progress on it. It can be a spouse, it can be an adult child if they're the sort of person that is really good at making sure you're accountable, or it can be a coach. It can be a colleague. It can be an online tool. All of these sorts of things will keep you moving forward. And then once you have that plan in place, I recommend that you start declaring who you're going to be to the world. Why? That puts pressure on you. Us lawyers tend to be people that respond well to pressure because that's what deadlines are. That's what everything that we do is high pressure and it's high stakes, whether it's making, following court rules and having your submissions in on time, or making sure that you have that contract completed by the date that it's supposed to be signed, all these sorts of things. So lawyers, more than many groups, respond to the pressure of an external commitment and what that can create. But then it also allows you to be able to shift that internal monologue about who and what you are. If everywhere you go, you're saying, I am the top climate change liaison ever in the United States between grassroots and national people, you're going to start to begin to break some of those toxic myths we talked about at the very beginning of this discussion. And you might want to even in certain cases begin to put it out on platforms like LinkedIn. Now, how do you do that? There is a book by someone named Mark Halpert, who has presented before Justia before, and you can look him up. He's excellent on exactly how to utilize LinkedIn effectively as a platform. By the way, it's not just good for declaring your intention, but as you are updating your resume, if you are looking for another job as part of this transition, or if you go into entrepreneurship and you want to put yourself out there for people to buy your services, having an up-to-date quality LinkedIn profile is a huge part of what needs to be in your plan. And so he has a book called LinkedIn Marketing Techniques for Law and Professional Practices. It was published by the American Bar Association. In terms of credibility, you don't get much more credible. Now we say if it's good enough for the ABA, it's good enough for me. So look up some of his stuff here on Justia, or get his book from the library or purchase it through Amazon. It's an incredible resource. And then make sure that you're always considering ethical obligations. Now, I've listed some here. They are in your supplemental materials as well. Some things to think about are that if you are in active practice when you're making this transition, make sure that you follow all the rules around advising your clients of the change, about preserving their records, about making sure that you are selling your practice if that's relevant, or terminating your relationship. The confidentiality obligations that are in the various ethical rules extend beyond the actual date of your engagement, of your formal engagement with the client. So make sure that you're aware of what those are and that you follow them. And if you are, and that goes as to conflicts of interest as well. And then if you are a government employee switching, make sure that you are in particular paying attention to the ethical rules, which in the model rules as of June 2024 specifically have some provisions relating to government attorney transitions. And then if you're no longer licensed, for heaven's sake, make sure that you are following the ethical canons with regards to holding yourself out as a practitioner. Now, I listed the model rules, but it goes without saying, I hope, that you also need to check the local rules and regulations for the jurisdiction that you are licensed, or jurisdictions that you're licensed to practice in. So as we begin to come to a close, what are some key takeaways? What are the things that you really need to remember from today? And what will have you smiling like she is, because she opened the box and a shiny new career is staring back at her? First of all, remember, an unfulfilling professional path presents clear and present dangers to your health and your long-term career prospects. I will share this as a dramatic but true last word on this topic. In 2023, last year, almost a year ago, a little more than a year ago, I woke up one day feeling a very sharp pain in my neck. Within 10 days, I had lost 20 pounds, was in and out of consciousness, couldn't walk, wouldn't eat or drink, and was rushed to the emergency room where I was in the hospital for 2 weeks with a mysterious contagion that I had caught, but to this day, no one knows what it is. I mention that because I could have died. In fact, I very nearly did. And to have gone through something like that, come out the other side, I really came to appreciate that thinking about our life and regrets is something that it's never too early to start doing. Right? I don't want anyone watching this now or later, or anyone that you talk to about this, to ever be in a situation where suddenly that time that you thought you had, you don't have. Then it's too late to have lived the life that we all have worked so hard to earn. Remember that a clear and present danger associated with not living a life, not having a career that's fulfilling, isn't just something that is a future risk. It's something that you could end up regretting right now. Lawyering's inherent relationship with risk can complicate or even override the mindsets that we need in order to make a career transition, particularly one that we perceive as risky. But understanding that risk aversion is itself very risky, as well as acknowledging that our relationship as lawyers with risk creates a conundrum, puts us in a position where we can manage that understanding of risk. And then we can be careful about who and what we associate ourselves with so that we don't let that pool of fear around risk keep us from doing what we need to with our lives. A 4-step process can help you identify the exact career transition that's right for you and that will set you up and can set you up to both arrive at it and keep you fulfilled. That plan needs to first involve disentangling your professional role from your identity, then analyzing how your view of that role impacts your ability to take action and transition. In other words, is the professional myth that you're telling yourself keeping you stuck? Is the role that you define yourself in subsuming your entire identity? If so, recognize that and cut the two apart. Get clarity on your inner truth values and any purpose-driven lessons that you've taken from your career so far that you can bring into a new career to give it true meaning. Then assess your core skills, including those that you might have forgotten or might not have used, and your experiences, then connect them to your values and who in this world you need and want to serve. With that information in hand, along with an understanding of the things in life that you can't sacrifice, write out a vision statement for yourself, then unlock your charisma and begin to practice talking about how you're going to get from your vision from where you are now. And that message, as you begin to refine it with connection to your heart, will drive your mission statement. Then finally, with that information in hand, build your roadmap for an epic future that will make that vision a lived reality. Nail down the right set of professional choices. Learn how to network effectively so that you have the people and the resources to help you get there. Get clarity on how you are the best solution to an actual problem. And then build out a formal action plan that at a minimum includes some sort of accountability component so that you keep moving forward, even if things look dark, and that takes into appropriate consideration ethics. If any of you want to talk further, I love getting to know people. This subject is so important to me, and I really want to be there for folks. I also would love it if all of you followed me on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I have daily content about leadership and professional transition for lawyers. On YouTube, I have a number of different videos that talk about leadership and professional transition issues from a number of different lenses and from a number of different perspectives. I also have a video interview series that is very interesting regarding leadership. Also, with regards to charisma, if you go to my LinkedIn site, one of the free resources that's out there to help you become more charismatic is a TEDx talk that you'll see right at the top of my LinkedIn profile that explains exactly how anyone can become charismatic and help you move your career transition along. Or, for heaven's sake, go and watch the Justia seminar that Mark Halpert, that LinkedIn author, and I put together about how to be a charismatic lawyer. And then, above all else, remember my final words for the day before I take questions. I want your future to be epic. I am going to, at this point, look at the Q&A. And Nina, I see that you've popped back into the house. Should I go through the questions? Do you want to ask them, Nina? How do we proceed?
We can go ahead and move on to questions. I do want to remind you all that are here, if you'd like to submit a question to Scott, that button that says Q&A in the control panel at the bottom of your screen is where you'll submit. And Scott, feel free to take the questions as you see fit.
Thank you. And I have a few minutes to go over and answer these. So if that is good with Justia, and I'm happy to support everyone that way. So someone asked, have you ever had a client who has had an especially hard time transitioning? What made it difficult and how did they overcome it? Yes, I have had some that have had especially difficult times. And the most difficult ones have been those who are trapped in these myths. They're resistant to the mindset changes. They are so entrenched in belief systems that are rooted in I can't, or I won't, or I'll fail, or what will people think about me? I spoke to someone once who said, I want to make a change. I just don't want to have to change. Well, if your mindset is that you aren't willing to change, you're not going to have a change. But I always say to my clients, and I say this to any of you if you're going to embark on this journey, say to yourself before you start, I will not let fear stop me. Because at the end of the day, all of these mindset things are driven by fear. And if that commitment is made and I can push the client through that and past it, you'd be amazed by what happens. And people's rates and what challenges them and their issues all vary. Part of what I as a coach need to work with is the whole panoply of things. And what people need to do if they're not working with a coach, if they're just doing it on their own, is be honest and just work through that. What kind of lawyer personality traits have people used to sell themselves during their transition? What other types of vocations do lawyers tend to be good at? You would be shocked at what sort of vocations people can be good at. I've heard of everything from owning a cookie store to being an interior designer to me working as a manufacturer to any. You would be surprised. A lot of times lawyers have suppressed artistic spirit or suppressed mathematical skills or all sorts of things. The sky is the limit so long as you have the fundamental ability to do that and the drive, right? So I never thought, for instance, that I could be a podcaster until I decided to do it. Now I'm on my fifth one. And so literally anything can happen. Don't let, outside of your own skills and abilities and drive, don't let anything limit you. And personality traits have, a lot of times the big ones are the ability to sell. If you want to move into any sort of entrepreneurial or artistic venture, the ability to sell is huge. And we as lawyers are really, really good at that. There was a bunch of others like being able to meet deadlines, writing skills, and verbal skills. All of those are massive in practically every career situation. What are some of the first steps maybe I can take when facing the fear of risk when it comes to these changes? Thank you all so much for these questions. These are really rich. Acknowledgement is huge. And then start to tell people about it. And you know what? This is going to sound a little bit sappy, but it works. Say to those in your circle, when I tell you that I'm afraid, and commit to doing that, hold my hand, be there for me, and let me know that you believe that I can do it. Half the time, overcoming fear is simply having someone, literally, in my case sometimes, or metaphorically, hold your hands and have them talk you off that ledge. That sounds sappy, but y'all, I promise it works better than you could imagine. Can you speak more on exactly how I can identify my core personal values to guide my career decisions effectively? So every day, practically, we do things in which we say, do I want to do that or not? What's the right thing to do? Decisions that we make about what's right and wrong are ethical groundings, and they reveal over time our ethical framework. So anytime you do something where you stopped and said, should I do this or not? Put that as well as the outcome in your journal. Should I go on YouTube and bust out this horrible, evil boss by name that I had? Well, you might decide to do that, right? Why did you decide to do that or not? Write that down in your journal. Or did I decide to take that yogurt that the auto checkout at Target didn't notice? Well, why or why not? A lot is being taught about your values there. I want to make a career transition, but I'm scared of losing connections to my current colleagues. Do you have any advice for how to navigate that? Yes. Learn to network, learn to network, learn to network. Networking really is at its core about building long-term sustainable relationships and leveraging those to do amazing things. How did I end up meeting Nina and being here with Justia? Because of someone I've known for years who I kept in touch with, who one day was like, oh, you need to meet the people at Justia. It was through networking. And so really networking, that's why I say you want to learn the rules so it's not all icky, but it will set you up for this exact thing. Learn about networking, the most valuable skill that you'll learn outside of perhaps law school itself, and maybe even more valuable than that. Can you provide examples of non-traditional career paths where legal skills are highly valued and transferable? Yes. Any career path in business where people will say, I don't want to pay you. Who would have thought a legal career would be helpful in manufacturing? Well, when clients wouldn't pay and I sent them an email with that ESQ after it, let me tell y'all, that was helpful. Any career where people need analytical thinking, any career where people tend to be chaotic in their thinking process, or creative fields where people may need someone to balance them. Operations, huge, because in law, we need to always think strategically, as well as senior executive positions that are not necessarily legal, right? That ability to think strategically is a core leadership skill. By the way, I'm going to be doing a CLE for Justia on emerging into leadership that talks a lot about that. And so if you think leadership may be a way that you want to go, or if you even have that question, it may be worth attending that. It's next month, I think on the 10th. What do you think the largest obstacle someone in the legal field might face transitioning out of a legal-oriented career? It sort of goes back to what I mentioned earlier. It is the mindset. The external obstacle can be that we want to sue. We want to sue. So really, I think making sure that, again, you sort of understand how to network and present yourself. That's why I say declare who you want to be and then be that, because that will begin to shift not only how you are inside, but how you're presenting. You're going to want to, you will almost just as a matter of force, begin to present the way that you want to be. And that will have a huge impact on mitigating some of these negative stereotypes about lawyers. And by the way, don't use Latin terms. That's a negative stereotype about lawyers too. They'll hate you for it, promise. Or at least they've hated me. I stopped. So what would you say are the key components of an actionable career transition plan? A, finding out where the people are that you want to be. B, or where you want to go and where you want to help. B, really figuring out what the specs are for that and what are the core skills. C, getting those skills in place. D, beginning to perhaps volunteer or engage in things that relate to those skills. So you might, like, for instance, want to join, if you want to be a CFO, join the board of a nonprofit and then ask if you can be their finance chair, if you have enough skills to be able to competently do that. Or maybe help your friends out with some interior design if you want to be an interior designer. Or be a guest on a podcast if you want to be a broadcast professional. All these sorts of things. And then, again, make sure you have those time frames so that you're following up. And then also have periodic rewards for yourself. A lot of this will be easy once you understand where it is that you want to go. That's the hardest part, bluntly. What would you say is the average timeline for a successful career transition? It depends on how radical the transition is and what other things you have going on. Like, if it is going into entrepreneurship, I would say give yourself a runway of a couple of years. Unless you are really financially solid, don't put in that resignation thing, I'm leaving tomorrow, and then write that business plan or that transition in place. If it is something that's closer to what you do, it might only take a year or so of concerted effort. A lot of that depends on the effort that you put in and what you're willing to learn. By the way, going back to that question about the plan, include in the plan things that you're also going to need to be familiar with. So again, if it's entrepreneurship, you're going to need to learn exactly how to sell, how to market, things like that. And if it is in some other area, you probably are going to want to learn the key software components. So you want to definitely include those sorts of things in the plan. And how do you manage self-doubt when you're on deadline? I assume that I'm not 100% sure I understand that question, but I'm going to assume it as self-doubt as in you have that plan and it's not moving the way that you want. Accountability isn't just having that person there to hold your hand and talk to you and having that other person who is there supporting you when you're feeling afraid and having them say, you can do this, I believe in you, right? It's also about making sure that they say to you, okay, this is why this happened. Now, what is your plan for turning it around and fixing it? You missed this deadline. You said you were going to have your LinkedIn profile up last Friday. It's Thursday. After last Friday, you didn't do it. How are we going to work together to make that happen? And how can I talk to you to make sure that it does? I hope that answers your questions. All of these questions could be discussed for hours. And I invite anyone who has further questions to reach out to me on YouTube or LinkedIn, and let's get to know each other and talk further, because as I hope is apparent, I care. And I want the best for you. Thank you for this engagement.
Thank you so much, Scott, for your additional insights, and thank you all for asking your lovely questions. We want to thank you all for joining us for another Justia webinar. Today, Scott gave us some great examples of career opportunities and how you can approach them both in and out of the legal field. And as I mentioned at the top of our presentation, we wanted to highlight Justia Legal Jobs, our hub where you can find the latest job opportunities in and around the legal field, with listings for legal industry roles including attorneys, legal interns, paralegals, court reporters, and more. We're here to help you find what you're looking for, no matter what side of the hiring process you're on. As a Justia Connect member with a claimed Justia Lawyer Directory profile, you can post unlimited jobs on Justia Legal Jobs. So if you'd like to find out more, you can go to justia.jobs. And additionally, if you are a Justia Connect Pro member, in addition to all of your lovely benefits, including CLE credit, you will also have the ability to have an enhanced featured listing for an expanded size and priority placement for any jobs that you post on Justia Legal Jobs. So if you're interested in upgrading and you haven't yet, you can go to pro.justia.com. We want to thank you all for joining us today and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy it, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos on law practice and legal marketing. See you in our next video.